Okay.
Yeah.
All right then. Right. Okay. Well, comrades, welcome to this meeting of Workers' International Network.
Give me 1 second, yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon what time zone you're in. This is a very important discussion we're having today, because the Indian subcontinent, without much recognition from the world's press, is actually a seething cauldron of revolution at the moment, with a general strike in Sri Lanka, with a series of general strikes that's taken place over the last 2 or 3 years in India against the corrupt neo-fascist regime that is playing upon divisions between Hindus and Muslims to try and assert its own control over the population. And we have in Pakistan also a history of similar turmoils, of attempts by the working class to get rid of this terrible regime, this cycle of alternation between unstable regimes that try and operate capitalism on the basis of the expectations of bigger capitalist powers, interrupted by periods of unstable military rule, which have done nothing to further the interests of the ordinary working people of Pakistan. And in this situation, actually, the comrades of Pakistan, the struggle, have really stood out amongst all the different attempts across the world to develop Marxism. They've stood out as able, still under very difficult conditions, to organize big conferences, to involve working class people in political discussion, in an understanding of Marxism, to involve hundreds and even thousands of working class women in the struggle for socialism. And we're very privileged to have with us this afternoon or today Asif Rashid from the struggle, who's going to talk to us about the situation in Pakistan. Asif, am I right in thinking that you've made a special effort and you will be able to get your remarks within about 20 to 25 minutes? Can you unmute yourself, please, Asif?
Can you hear me, comrade?
Yes, fine.
Welcome to the meeting, Asif. Just give me an idea of how long you would like to speak for, please.
20 to 25 minutes.
Your introduction to this meeting.
Thanks, comrade. First of all, I would like to thank the comrades of Workers' International Network, especially Roger Silverman, for organizing this session on the issue of Pakistan. It will play an important role in building the working coordination to organize the workers around the world. Comrades, we are living in such an age where capitalism is going through its biggest historical, economic, political, and cultural crisis. This is being manifested in many forms of various events all over the world. Pakistan political and state crisis is also a continuation of this. Before I talk about the current crisis in Pakistan, I would like to talk a little bit about history so that comrades can easily understand the current crisis. The Pakistani state and ruling class are going through the most complex and critical period of their history. In these circumstances, the need to rely on Marxist foundation over and over again, as well as subjecting the analysis to various factors, becomes more important. The evolution of Pakistani state and society is a practical manifestation of historical law of uneven and combined development. rather than in classical capitalist style. In the ancient furnishings, here it was the result of direct intervention of British imperialism. The bourgeoisie here is deprived of the characteristics of competent ruling class of this state due to historical weakness and delays. As a result of which, the role of certain institutions of the state has increased to the point of exaggeration and subjugation of the ruling classes. The weakness and incompetence of the bourgeoisie in Pakistan has also become a major reason for the domination of ruling class for the state itself. Sometimes they manage the state through direct interventions, take over, or in various objective conditions, bring the political representatives of the bourgeoisie to the throne of power. In Pakistan, politically, the increased need for state domination and repression paved the way for intervention for the state military establishment in the economy, which led to its emergence as a stakeholder. Anarchy prevailed, which led to severe instability. This contradiction is seen in the form of civil and military, democratic and dictatorial governments and methods. These contradictions are then imposed on the whole society and in an attempt to blend the class contradictions. This historical weakness of ruling classes has made it more reactionary. The inability to move society forward has made them superstitious, conservative, and outright inclined to impose this regression on the whole society. In this situation, in the last 74 years, the ruling classes here has not yet been able to create any solid political identity, a far-reaching style of governing. From its inception, the state has used religious fundamentalism as a political tool. This was intensified during and after General Ziaul, a military dictator in 80s. Extremist groups based on different religious sects have been used to maintain their rule. They have blunted the consciousness of working class and openly worked for sabotage the working class movements. This process implies the ruling classes here are not able to run this society on a healthy capitalist basis. Despite the contradiction in Pakistani state, there is a nexus of different powerful factions of military elite, judiciary, and politicians, which keep taking different shapes and forms. These elements try to maintain their grip on society by using new methods of coercion, exploitation, and nexus in order to maintain their hegemony. It indicates the weakness of state rather than its strength. The state institutions are now failing to hide their battles and contradictions from the eyes of people, where in the past they used to control this issue to some extent. Conflicts between different state factions have come to the fore in the last 3 or 4 years. Nawaz Sharif's ouster from power was the culmination of which the whole system has been badly exposed to the public. Nawaz Sharif was the secret of the house, which has dealt a severe blow to the sanctity of the secret institutions. But then they also try to keep these contradictions to a certain extent. The problem with the survival of the fittest is that breakdown doesn't ruin the whole system or society somewhere, downfall and challenge their hegemony. In this background, in the present circumstances, the state institution here had to be inclined to establish Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, PTI plus political setup. The disgusting face of military dwarfism was in fact a continuation of the old style of governing, which is called a hybrid system of government. But weak states like Pakistan cannot afford new political experiences. On the other hand, the crisis is so deep and serious that no single method works in the long run. Society based on deep economic crisis continues to suffer from instability and chaos. When the traditional political faces of ruling classes badly lose their credibility with the masses, they become a challenge to governance. New and credible faces of bourgeoisie have failed to emerge on the political horizon for specific objective reasons. Imran Khan was, in fact, the epitome of the restless and impatient daughter of bourgeoisie. According to Trotsky, as a result of a psyche that thrives in a particular state of affairs, the true raw material carves for itself a worldly political face. In such cases, PTI and Imran Khan actually reflect the current state of affairs. Middle class impatience, rudeness, superstition, religiosity, hypocrisy, and political apathy are the main features, and which is represented by Imran Khan. This was a weak and fragile political setup based on some factions of the state elite, which has had to create conditions for bigotry. It was a sign of the impasse between military establishment and the state strategists that an insane and psychologically unbalanced man had to be enthroned. It was not the result of Imran Khan's obedience, but a political trend with a penny program on deceptive non-issues like fight against corruption and provision of justice, and an unholy alliance of state elites. For working classes and people, it was a great deception. Imran Khan's experiment failed completely. Its social, political, and state contradiction intensified in under Imran's government. As a result, he was a serious threat to the entire system. So he was removed from the power by the establishment. The semi-fascist regime of Pakistan Movement for Justice, PTI, founded in 1996 by the Pakistani cricketer turned politician Imran Khan, came to a dramatic end in the early hours of April 10 after remaining in power for almost 4 years. Despite their imminent defeat in the no confidence motion presented by opposition in the parliament, Imran and his colleague of psychopaths and supporters remain obstinate, unabashed, and arrogant, which speaks volumes about the real nature of PTI. Such bullying and effrontery have rarely been observed in the history of bourgeois politics of Pakistan and most probably the whole world. It clearly shows that the PTI is not a traditional bourgeois party, but a political phenomenon of the petty bourgeoisie, led by an upstart, vulgar, a very reactionary section of the bourgeoisie, which can better be characterized as lumpen bourgeoisie, have deep fascist tendencies. They dragged the circumstances to such a level that ultimately the state had to intervene through the army and judiciary and kick them out at a gunpoint. However, the extraordinary confidence of Imran Khan and his stooges at the time of intense pressure was not without a reason. It is now an open secret that they had support of a minority but powerful section of deep state. Imran Khan's bullying and arrogance and the demonization of powerful state institutions by the social media wing of PTI, one of the most effective and intriguing in the world, despite their ouster from power, clearly shows that the supporter of these very reactionary sections of the state continues behind the scene. No, the PTI is...
You've had 10 minutes, comrade.
Thank you. No, the PTI is trying to create as much of mess for the new coalition government as possible by all legal, semi-legal, and illegitimate means. This is one of the deepest state and political crises in the history of Pakistan, which is the manifestation of deep contradictions not only in the deep state, but also in society at large, of which we are witnessing only the initial stages. There may be many more phases to come. It is no exaggeration to say that almost 4 years of PTI stint in power was one of the darkest periods of this country, which only drove society backwards. And in the absence of mass revolutionary upsurge, its reactionary political, social, cultural ramifications will continue to haunt Pakistan. Imran Khan's so-called New Pakistan was a nightmare for working masses. After witnessing his government complete failure in the first 1.5 years in power, Imran Khan resorted to the worst kind of religiosity and national chauvinism, which even Ziaul, the US-backed military dictator, did not dare to use. Attacks on journalists become more frequent. Reactionary contents were infused in the curriculum. TV channels were imbued with conservative and fanatical dramas and programs. New state institutions and authorities were established to promote religious bigotry. Even a new university was promoted promoted Sufism, a kind of Islamic mysticism. Rape was officially declared to be the result of pornography and a fault. Sorry, comrade, power cuts.
Asif, sorry, yeah, we missed about the last half minute of what you just said. So if you would just go back and repeat.
Okay, comrade, I will repeat. Attacks on journalists had become frequent. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Reactionary contents were infused in the curriculum. TV channels were imbued with conservative and fanatical dramas and programs. New state institutions and authorities were established to promote religious bigotry. Even a new university was built to promote Sufism, a kind of Islamic mysticism. Rape was officially declared to be the result of pornography and the fault of the women wearing indecent clothing. Internally and externally, Imran Khan's government took the Taliban's policies to new heights, which even Jamaat-e-Islami, a traditional Islamist party of the country, could not imagine doing. Religiosity, non-scientific reasoning, indolence, and conservatism were officially promoted in the name of spiritualism and Sufism. Similarly, the use of vulgar and abusive languages and double-entendedness by PTI stalwarts have become a norm. Actually, such measures of keeping masses of people mentally and emotionally numb have become inevitable for certain sections of the state to perpetuate their class interest. The recent spike in heart-wrenching incidents of mob lynching by religious goons and the rape and murder of women and children was not without a reason. There are the manifestation of deepening social crisis, which in the absence of revolutionary alternative on the political horizon is being reflected in the phenomena of PTI. Had Imran Khan remained in power, he would not only have strangled every progressive tendency in the country, but would have also plunged the society into further Talibanization. While living, however, he dealt such blows to the discipline, structures, foreign relations, and image of state, which have no precedent in checkered history of Pakistan. If due to the internal contradictions of state, Imran Khan gets off scot-free, he would continue to imbue society with his poisonous rhetoric. The imbalance in the system caused by Nawaz Sharif, fostered by the military through the judiciary in 2017, has still not been corrected. Imran Khan has further deepened this instability. Mentally, psychologically, and politically, Imran Khan is a fascist who represents a semi-fascist tendency based on the arrogance, adamantly, and egoism of middle class, and who is supported by the worst kind of reactionary, perverse, and cruel elements of state and society, submerged in black economy. In many aspects, the Imran Khan phenomenon resembles that of Donald Trump in US and Narendra Modi in India. The supporters of PTI are the class of people who would go to any length and extent, including the violence and repression, to impose their filthy counter-revolutionary norms and ideology whenever they get the opportunity. The historical conditions which promoted the rise of PTI were actually created by all the traditional parties of this country who are now in coalition against it. On the one hand, it is a historical failure of the so-called liberal or semi-liberal bourgeoisie represented by PMLN, who could not develop a modern, healthy, and democratic capitalist society due to their historical backwardness and belatedness. They failed to crush or control the conservative section of the state and bring the state under their dominance. On the other hand, the continuous betrayals, corruptions, and opportunism of the leadership of Pakistan People's Party, the traditional left-wing party which has now swung too far to the right, caused it to degenerate in its historical low and rendered it into a political tool for the system, incapable of providing any hope or revolutionary way out to the working class. The rise of a third political force was inevitable in such conditions. In the absence of a revolutionary alternative on the political horizon, PTI arose as a political expression of an ugly, upstart, urban, white-collar middle class in the backdrop of an overt and covert state sport, and engulfed some sections of the traditional sport based of Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. That is petty bourgeois traders and businessmen, and also some layers of working class which used to be the sport of the People's Party, although in general the working class rejected this new phenomenon for their start. PTI is a kind of suicide bombing on the fabrics of the society by the reactionary middle class followers of a narcissist, arrogant, mentally ill but handsome personality Imran Khan, a playboy cum cricketer turned into a masiha who knows everything but anything. This phenomena aimed to wipe out last vestiges of democratic freedoms and progressive thoughts from Pakistani society. The youth of the above mentioned middle class is on the forefront for this campaign. They seem incapable any sound thinking, reasoning, and analysis. Politically dumb would undoubtedly be an appropriate expression for them. However, in a society where student politics is made a crime, students' unions are banned for decades, dominant politics is bereft of ideology, and textbooks are filled with reactionary filth, the resulting product would definitely be this creature. These are the crimes of the same political elite who are showing off a Democrats these days against PTI. And this whole fiasco, however, Imran Khan's great success consists in getting the unprecedented price hike, unemployment, corruption, and mismanagement of his government overshadowed by the so-called US conspiracy against his governments. It is an irony that he handed over the state bank, the country's central bank, to the IMF in his imperialist pandering and still claiming to be an anti-imperialist. It is probable that Imran Khan's alleged patrons, their chief of the country main spy agency, ISI, visited to the Kabul right after Taliban's coming to power and brandishing the cup of tea to the media might have proved that last straw on camel's back. It might be one of the major reasons of his coming under a cloud. However, it was not merely an issue of foreign policy, misadventure, or diplomatic plunder. Imran Khan had become a liability for his mentors and had brought the country's economy, politics, and whole system to brink. The establishment, at least a major and decisive part of it, had to get rid of him, or they themselves were doomed. But one thing that is clear is that this whole experiment hybrid regime, which started in 2018, which was in the making for many years before that, has become a severe headache for the country's establishment. It is proving to be a strenuous and damaging task to wind it all up. No, the question is about the future events, in which the question of the future of the PTI itself is the essential one. There are many factors to consider in this respect. The foremost among them is the internal contradiction of deep state and the performance and measures of the newly formed coalition government. It is probable that attempts might be made in coming days to dislodge important supporters of Imran Khan from key state institutions. This can backfire. Imran Khan still yields sizable support in middle layers of powerful state institutions, particularly in military. Perhaps it is the reason the ruling faction is compelled to let Imran Khan get off scot-free for the moment.
You've had 20 minutes, comrade.
Okay, comrade. They might be thinking to punish or sideline him gradually. One of the key factors in this entire scenario would be the extent of economic relief to the masses delivered by the new government, which is under huge pressure. However, they have very few options. On the one hand, Imran Khan would go to any length in impertinence and impudence and take an advantage for every austerity measures for the government. On the other hand, there is IMF, and then there are pressure from below, from the working masses. Shahbaz Sharif, a newly elected president, is on a hot seat. The economy is in ruin, which historic deficits and debts. First, the corona pandemic and now the Ukraine war has plunged the world economy into a deeper crisis. Imran Khan had devalued the currency to such a level that efforts of global inflation on the country have doubled. The economic conditions are far more terrible than when the PMLN left the government in 2018. The new finance minister, Miftah Ismail, has categorically stated in his press conference that all the agreements with world financial institutions, including the IMF, would be respected. This means that even in the best case scenario, in which they may succeed in convincing the IMF to review certain conditions, the masses of the people would not get any meaningful relief. For the movement, they have succeeded somehow in retaining the petroleum prices. But if the Ukraine war drags on and exacerbates, of which there is a huge possibility, the prices might shoot up many times, which could fuel an unprecedented crisis in Pakistan. The worst case scenario in Pakistan would be like that of Sri Lanka. The enthronement of Shahbaz Sharif as a prime minister indicates that in the absence of any extraordinary events, the general elections would be held on the appointed time next year or even few months after that. The coalition government will try to postpone the crisis and drag on until the new election. In the meanwhile, an important appointment, the most important thing among many others, will be taking place in November this year. The country's most powerful army chief. It was against the backdrop of key appointments that the opposition hastily dislodged Imran Khan, while Imran Khan wanted to remain in power till that time by hook or crook. In any case, this government is a very temporary and artificial political setup, which cannot necessarily remain as stable as it seems now in the near future. During this period, Imran Khan would seek to create a mass movement against government and try to give them a hard time through protests, sit-ins, marches, aggressive speeches and statements. He will also use his president to create every possible hurdle for the government. There is another probability that Imran Khan might be entangled in a lot of lawsuits by the government. There is also news that the government is planning to try Imran Khan's, his president, one of his governors and deputy speaker of the parliament during his time in government for violating the constitution. This would be the case of high treason, which can land them in deep waters. He may also be wiped out from the political horizon by other means. The upcoming decisions of foreign funding lawsuits by the Election Commission is a sword hanging on his head. These lawsuits may end up in banning the PTI altogether and disqualifying all its members. In this way, the government may buy some time. But one thing is clear, Imran Khan has more or less burned all his bridges to power by his mayors in the last couple of months. He is neither acceptable to the serious strategies of state nor to the America now. After being ousted from power, he is closing any remaining door towards a constitutional and democratic ascent to power again. His coming to power again would require an electoral rigging on scale far wider than one we witnessed in 2018. When the state stole election from him, it can also be any other chaotic and bloody conflagration which can always be expected in societies like Pakistan, particularly in the current scenario of rifts within the deep state. If it happens, he would resort to his typical dictatorial and fascist actions to crush all the dissenting voices and taking the economic and political repression to new heights. This would be an unprecedented disaster for Pakistani society. However, the decline and disintegration of PTI would speed up if they remain out of the power for long. There is always a limit to protest and verbal agitations. His middle class supporters inside and outside the country are furious and agitated for the movement as he freshly been ousted from the power. It would be very difficult for him to drag this momentum as the time goes by. However, for the time being, they would continue to embark on vulgar, filthy, and fallacious campaign through their social media networks, which were once promoted and built by state itself. A sizable section of corporate media is also supportive to Imran Khan. Another probability is that PTI might be dragged on as a small pressure group for a longer period. Or if it is crashed or dies its own death, still the circumstances which gives birth to it would remain. It would be resurrected in another reactionary and fascist form, even without Imran Khan. All developments in this system would eventually go against the working class until it is passive, atomized, and unorganized. This democracy and economy of the bourgeoisie is incapable of abolishing the condition which gave birth to such political and religious fascist tendencies. This historical task can only be performed by the working class. The upcoming changes and transformations in the socio-economic conditions can shake the working class to its core. Under capitalism, they are only granted the right to get robbed by the changing faces of this system. However, when the working masses awaken from their slumber, they would perform the historic task of snatching everything away from the ruling classes. That's all from my side, comrade.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, Asif. Thank you very much for that very thorough background and introduction to this discussion that we're having today. There's a lot of points there that I'm sure comrades would like to ask about or develop some of the points that Asif has made. And I'll throw the meeting open now for any comrade who wants to put up their hand to make a contribution or ask a question. Okay, I see Ian's hand is up. Ian, would you like to come in, please?
Hi, yeah, couple of questions. Thinking about things, I guess, from more the perspective of Britain and the West. and the main enemy of us being at home. Obviously, you're toe to toe with the PTI on the ground in Pakistan, and certainly wouldn't be uncritical of them at all. They're a typical bourgeois party, populist, socially conservative, but I wouldn't necessarily see them as a fascist formation or even like Trump or Modi. And getting back to the point about where I and some of the other folk on the call stand in the world, I think it was our governments, along with your deep state that did for Imran Khan, was very suspiciously close to when he went to Russia, that he got ousted. I know he's been saying that, but it certainly has a lot of plausibility about it. Some of the mainstream media in the West, like the BBC and the Guardian, and what are supposedly pure news articles as opposed to comment, sometimes editorialized that, well, Imran says that, but there's no proof. But it was a very significant coincidence that 1 minute he's in Moscow and the next he's got the sack at a time like this with the situation in Ukraine. Of course, Pakistan's actually a bigger country than Russia, so in a totally fair democratic world, you could say that Putin's getting close to Pakistan as opposed to Imran getting close to Russia. But certainly in terms of the role of the US with our own government as its junior partner, you could see the motive there for them wanting him out, taking a more independent foreign policy, and the role of the generals in Pakistan, who've always been the most pro-US element in that society, who ironically did actually help Imran to power, if I'm not mistaken, at the last election, that have since seemingly turned on him. So when it comes to the question of anti-democracy, it seems more like the current government is anti-democratic than the last one, and that perhaps the task for socialists would be to defeat that coup while remaining independent of Imran. I'm almost thinking of the situation with Kornilov and how Lenin opposed the Kornilov coup against Kerensky and then went on to settle accounts with Kerensky, having remained independent of him, but seen the threat of a coup as worse at that time. So that's possibly a difference of emphasis from some of the denunciations of the PTI, but I'd be interested in your take on that. Also, just a couple of things about the use of religion. Just maybe what's the word? A minor question, but something that I heard, maybe I heard wrong, when you mentioned Sufism, that they're promoting obscurantism under the banner of Sufism. As far as I was aware, the Sufis weren't liked by the Islamic fundamentalists precisely because they weren't about imposing a one-size-fits-all view on society. And that certainly the Wahhabis and the Salafis thought Sufis were almost like heretics or apostates. So just a bit of clarification on that. As I said, I might have misheard. And finally, when it comes to opposing whoever's in power in Pakistan, whether it's a populist PTI or now this undemocratic lash-up that seems to have been put in by the West and the deep state, what are the progressive forces in Pakistan that are making a mass impact? So I think a lot, as you said, a lot of the current problem is that the PPP have moved so far to the right. It's become just a family dynasty. For a while, the leader of the PPP was 19 years old because he inherited it direct from his mum. And then there was Mr. 10%. But what about Fatima Bhutto and her side of what seems to be the left side of the split in the Bhutto family? I think she's a member of a party. I don't know how big it is, but I know a lot of people have been wanting her to get into politics for years, and she's been saying no because she doesn't believe in the dynasticism. But I don't know if she could make an impact now if she ever did join politics going forward, as opposed to or as well as that, what other kind of parties are there on the left, and what are the prospects for making an independent impact in the coming time? Because it seems like very, very open in a way, but also, as you say, dangerous time in the next few months, I guess, till the next election, and then going forward, whatever comes out of that.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Now, Asif, I'm sure you're familiar with this approach to discussion. We have a number of people going to make contributions, and you come back at the end and reply to everybody's points. Is that okay with you? Next speaker in the discussion, Roger Silverman. Please come in, Roger.
Right, thank you, Comrade. First of all, thank you very much to Comrade Asif, who's given us a really clear insight into what's going on. Particularly important because there are illusions in Imran Khan among the emigre communities of Pakistanis, particularly certainly in Britain. And I think we have to put it into the context that the history of Pakistan is a succession of unstable military dictatorships interspersed with even more unstable civilian regimes, and both reflect the total economic and social impasse of society. And I think that the emergence of Imran Khan is a kind of product of mass disgust and disillusion with both of these traditions. Pakistan, remember, emerged out of a communal bloodbath, one of the bloodiest in history. It was the vivisection of a multi-ethnic, multinational, multicultural, subcontinental patchwork, which was the brainchild of a ruthlessly cynical imperialist policy by the British of divide and rule. Just as they practiced it in everywhere else where they had set foot, whether in Ireland, in Palestine, in Cyprus, etc. And inevitably, that led to a continuing chain reaction of successive communal fissions, which soon meant that the new artificially constructed nation of Pakistan was itself chopped in half. The secession of Bangladesh, after yet another horrific war, reduced the reach of the Punjabi feudal ruling class by more than half and plunged what was left of Pakistan into revolution. And it's been still, what is left of Pakistan is still bursting at the seams. Now, after the collapse of the Ayub Khan dictatorship, after the Bangladesh war, there came to power Bhutto, who's the founder of the dynasty that Ian was referring to. He was an aristocratic playboy who found himself left holding the power following the unceremonious flight of the generals. And he was virtually a hostage to the revolution that was playing out on the streets. Strikes, gharows, uprisings, occupations, mutinies, millions on the march, all of that impelled Bhutto to enact some radical populist measures. So his government came to adopt a democratic guise only under the explosive pressure of the revolutionary upsurge. Bhutto found himself suddenly denouncing the 22 ruling families, which included, by the way, his own, and until the movement began to subside, was helplessly ratifying the democratic reforms already enacted by mass action on the ground. And for these concessions, he was never to be forgiven by the feudal elite. It was when the Bhutto regime faltered and succumbed to the pressures of the feudal landowners that the military fundamentalist counter-revolution took its revenge. Barbaric repression was inflicted by the monstrous regime of General Zia-ul-Haq in an 11-year reign of terror. Bhutto personally was tortured and then hanged. And under this ferocious dictatorship, the feudal landowners restored a regime of barbaric repression, mass hangings, torture, public floggings of PPP activists and supporters, in order literally to beat out of the masses that faint glimmer of hope, of democratic self-respect and humanity, and to reduce them again to slavish beasts of burden. Now, Pakistan since then has been subject to a succession of military and civilian regimes, of tumbling ex-Sandhurst tin pot military dictators, interspersed with brief periods of corrupt pseudo-parliamentarism, and the long pirouette of the alternating gangster cliques of the Pakistan People's Party on the one hand and the Muslim League on the other, only further demoralized and disoriented the masses. And it was out of that feeling of revulsion that the Imran Khan phenomenon materialized. It was a matter of disgust with both of those two failed parties. And like his predecessors, Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Zia-ul Haq, General Musharraf, Nawaz Sharif, and the Bhuttos, that Imran Khan too began with demagogic promises against corruption. In fact, Imran Khan had the absolute cheek and nerve to boast that he could be trusted not to be corrupt because he was too rich to be corrupt already. He soon proved himself, in any case, yet another instrument of feudal rule, and resorted yet again to the old trick originally taught him by the British Raj of communal poison within a context of catastrophic, this time, economic and social crisis. So whether under military or nominally civilian rule, the rulers of Pakistan practiced rampant corruption combined with shameless subservience to the demands of US imperialism. And it made little difference which regime was in power. Both were subject to pressure as much from the IMF and the Pentagon as from domestic sources. And either could seek advantage in military adventurism, even threatening a nuclear catastrophe of their own, quite apart from all the other danger points on the planet today. So to talk of an independent capitalist class in Pakistan would be fanciful. In India, there were long-established genuine local monopolies, deliberately cultivated by the British as a hedge against revolution. But in Pakistan, there never was any shadow of a genuine local bourgeoisie capable of counterposing itself to imperialism. The capitalists in Pakistan are parasitic. At best, they're smugglers, gangsters, and corrupt middlemen. There's been not even the pretense or hollow proclamation, as in India, of a bourgeois democratic program, but merely reactionary demagogy born in the genocidal slaughter of partition under the cover of communalism and two nations, and inevitably soon afterwards, an Islamic republic. No land reform, no modern industry, no mass education, and only a very intermittent and grotesque parody of parliamentary democracy, and no national unification. On the contrary, a spectacular case of national disintegration, along with Yugoslavia and the USSR, of course. Workers and peasants are intermittently on the march. The intelligentsia are in revolt. The state is visibly disintegrating, and sinister forces are trying to intimidate the masses by terror. So if there's any country in the world crying out for the creation of an independent workers' party, it's Pakistan, which is gripped in the most polarized social turmoil. And I want to just finish on this point. The group with which Comrade Asif is associated, that's the Jadal Jihad, the struggle, has taken impressive strides in the direction of forming such a party. I had the honor and the privilege of working with that group and its precursors over several decades. And I want to end by giving a description of the last Congress that I attended of their group in November 2018. Now, in the days leading up to the Congress, the entire country was paralyzed by the agitation of fundamentalist mobs. For days on end, main roads were blocked, phone signals were cut, Pakistan had ground to a near standstill. But despite these obstacles, 1,500 comrades from all over Pakistan somehow managed to attend the Congress. and the spirit of revolution flowed through it, in the determination of its participants to brave the communal mobs and the roadblocks to get there in the first place, in the banners, the wall posters, the portraits of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Trotsky that festooned the hall, in the discipline, the enthusiasm, the songs, the poems, in the overwhelmingly proletarian composition, in the fact that nearly all the comrades were unmistakably leaders in their own areas, in the number of women and young people present, in the punctuation of the debates with revolutionary songs and poems, but above all, in the high political level of debate, the passionate oratory, the revolutionary spirit. And in that situation, my question to Comrade Asif is, when will the struggle become a mass party? We have a situation where the whole of the subcontinent is aflame with revolution. In Sri Lanka, we have an almost unprecedented mass insurrection and the proclamation of an indefinite general strike. In India, we have successively the biggest strikes in world history, with 250 million people involved at a time. And, Comrade Asif talked about Pakistan awakening from its slumbers. It seems to me it is likely to awaken very soon. And I would really welcome a sort of practical report also from Comrade Asif, on top of the analysis, the very good analysis that he gave, on what are the perspectives for a revolutionary uprising in Pakistan, and what role can his magnificent organization play in that movement. So thanks, comrades.
Thank you, Roger. Next speaker in the discussion is David Hempson.
Yeah, thanks for some marvelous contributions from Asif and also Roger and others. My contribution is more questions. First of all, I see it's been raised in the chat, but China has a vision for Pakistan as a route towards the world markets, and apparently has made major investments in road, rail, and ports to facilitate another avenue or another route to world markets, through Pakistan. And that obviously involves all kinds of deals with the local political ruling class and many implications for the working class, because this is one of the points in which any part of the national bourgeoisie can lean against. It seems, that's first point. The second point, it does seem, and I think this has been raised by some of the comrades, that Imran Khan was balancing East-West and maybe against China too, to ensure his survival. So he even came up with a pseudo anti-imperialist position that he was being displaced by America. That was the cause of his displacement. The question then is, why did the military change its attitude towards Imran Khan? Because it seems as though they helped install him, and then they helped withdraw the support from him and then bring him down. Now, we know that the military has a kind of maverick position. It was used by the CIA and by US imperialism, in Afghanistan, with all kinds of links to fundamentalism. And it now is, is possibly searching for a new role. But it seems as though all the civilian regimes have, in a sense, been pseudo-civilian regimes, because the military has had such a powerful, role in the state. And, to what extent has the military increased its role? And what we see as politics is actually just the play of different factions of the national bourgeois, which, as Roger has explained, is blown from all over the place, because it actually has no economic role in that society. and actually is just playing East-West and in the anti-Indian sentiment, various factions of religion and so forth, so forth. So the question is, what then is the role of the military now, and what is the character of the regime? It does seem as though the divisions of within the bourgeois parties are such that they want a form of democracy, at least electoral democracy and parliamentary democracy, so they can play out the divisions and try and work out the divisions among themselves, rather than engage in full-scale, communal warfare, which will actually divide the country into forms of civil war. And it seems as though there is a growing pressure, originally against Imran Khan, which helped displace him, but with military support. And then now, where is the military, standing now? Is it actually in full support of the existing regime, or not? I mean, I then return to the point that, Rogers concluded, is that with all this chaos and factionalism, we have heard the most amazing reports. I can remember one particularly of a political leader, I think from Balochistan or for right on the border, who had had his life threatened, many times and had actually been attacked many times, but was supporting the party and building. And, to what extent are we finding and pulling together, really marvelous comrades who are prepared to stand against sectarianism and against all the divisions, of Pakistan's politics, and rise to the occasion and actually organize a mass movement at the base, turn the students, to a socialist view of society, and actually, help develop a mass workers' party, because it seems that we have the nucleus, but the question is, how do we grow? Those questions. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, David. At the moment, I can't see any hands up. Does any comrade who even may have a short point or a brief comment or a question, would any comrade like to come in? Okay, I don't see any hand going up. So I'm going to, Asif, if I may, I'm going to put the meeting back into your hands so that you can respond. This is not the end of the meeting. If you make a response to the three comrades who've already contributed, and then perhaps that will stimulate some more discussion when you've when you've said a few more words, Asif. So it's over to you.
Thanks, comrade. I have many questions to answer, but I will shortly answer some of the questions as Roger answered some questions. That the crisis of, as I mentioned in my lead off, that the crisis of Pakistani state was a historical crisis, that a belated and a backward capitalist country and its capitalism. So the imperialist intervention in Pakistan from its inception was there. And in every change in government or any other major regional change, there is always the imperialist intervention, because the Pakistan is a strategically very important country for British imperialism as well as Chinese. As we see that the Pakistani military establishment and bourgeoisie have managed a balance in between Chinese and British imperialism and the British US imperialism. The US role in Afghanistan, as in past we see that when US intervened Afghanistan back in 2000, the huge intervention was, huge money was made by the Pakistani military and civilian administration. And the Chinese investment in CPEC and a port in Gwadar, Balochistan had sharpened the contradiction in that region. A national insurgency movement against Pakistani state backed by American and Indians against Pakistani state. The purpose of which is to create a situation where Pakistani establishment will make their relations better with the US. So there would be no, and Pakistani corrupt elite and establishment have their own interest. They make their decisions according to their interest, according to their monetary interest, and according to their control or structures in the internal situation in Pakistan. As Conrad asked about the military role in present regime or in favor of Imran Khan, as we see that the military managed and engineered the government of Imran Khan, as Roger mentioned and I mentioned in my lead off, that the traditional parties, traditional right-wing Muslim League and the so-called traditional left-wing party, People's Party, have completely failed to govern in this country and to improve the living conditions and to grow the economy in Pakistan. So there was a space in making. And in this situation, the working class is not in action. There are reasons. The main reason is that the PPP's betrayal with the working class in previous 2 decades. So the working class is inactive. In Pakistan, more than 90% people did not take part in active politics, especially working class. Only less than 1% workers are organized in unions. And in private sector, there is no unionized workers. And the conditions are very severe and wages are very low. In past 2 decades, there is no increase in wages of workers. But in recent times, we have seen the movement in which our Workers Front, Pakistan Trade Union Defense Campaign played a leading role in Balochistan, in Islamabad, sit-in by worker against privatization and against the policies of Imran government under the slogan of "Gut Out IMF," in which we have a leading position and we have a huge influence in organized workers, in organized workers, but in private sectors we have a limited access due to ununionized workers and tough working conditions. But in recent times, especially in COVID situation, there was huge protest against fee hikes in universities, and we have played a leading role in that situation. And we, in almost all universities, we have won the movements and we have led the students to win their demands. But there, as we have mentioned, that the situation that there is no movement in working class, that creates a situation of depression, passive, and a politically tough conditions for the left. As we have, as Roger mentioned, as we have very strong organizational base all over Pakistan, but the without a working class active movement and youth active movement, there are limits to organize a mass movement. But the conditions of Pakistani capitalism and the new government and the role of IMF in Pakistan is leading to a situation where the working class must have to take action against the capitalist and neoliberal policies, privatization, and price hikes. And we have a confidence that in recent month there was a movement against timing and in banking sectors, and we have a leading position in that movement, and within a week that movement win its demands. We have a strong footings in all major cities of Pakistan, but we are lacking with mass support. But we have a strong nucleus base in major working class institutions and other major universities in students. And we have a confidence that the situation in Pakistan and the world capitalist crisis is imposing us a situation where working class have no other way to fight against capitalism. And the government and the situation in Pakistan, that the role of IMF and the debts and other major issues in Pakistan have creating a situation that in which there in future there will be a struggle, mass struggle and mass movements in Pakistan. And we are hopeful, and we have a preparation, and we have a strong basis and strong nucleuses in all industrial and organized workers, and that we are hoping that if a situation created as in past in small movements we played our role, and in future we will play a decisive role to create a mass movement. And the situation, as Roger mentioned, that we have a very strong organizational basis, but without a mass movement or mass political activity, there are some limits. But whenever the Pakistani working class or youth are in movements, we have intervene in it, and we gain some basis in those movements. And in future we hope that we will get these we will strengthen our forces, and we will build a revolutionary organization, revolutionary party that will transform the situation. And we have a strong contacts in India, in Sri Lanka, and in Afghanistan and other countries in region. And we are planning to take advantage of the situation as we have seen in Sri Lanka, as we have seen in India. But there is a crisis of leadership. As Trotsky mentioned, the crisis of 21st century is the crisis of leadership. And we are facing the crisis of leadership, but the events in coming future will create the situation in which we will overcome this weakness, and we will organize the working class. We will lead the working class towards socialist revolution. Thank you, comrade.
Okay, well, Asif, thank you very much for that contribution. It would have been a fitting summing up to the meeting, but there is still time, and I can see that Ian has already raised his hand. Oh no, actually Ian's doing a thumbs up and a round of applause for you. There is plenty of time, comrades, for further discussion, and I will bring in, I hope I'm right pronouncing this right, Ajaz. Please come in, Ajaz, and make your contribution.
Yes, thank you. I'm really surprised at the analysis that Mr. Asif Rashid has expressed here. In my opinion, the facts and the realities in Pakistan are completely different to what he's described. You had, and Roger mentioned earlier, People's Party and Nawaz Sharif's party ruling the country and provinces for years on end and lining their pockets. So we all agree on that. Mostly there was Mr. Zardari was 10%, and Nawaz Sharif's got his millions and billions of dollars, just like Marcus in the Philippines, here in the UK. And Imran Khan came in as a fresh face, and he galvanized people, and he won the majority. His party was a leading majority party, not a majority in the sense of that he could form the government. So he had a coalition partners, and with that, their help, he was governing. And he was bringing in charges against all the previous corrupt ones. And they were fighting for their lives because they were looking at long-term jail sentences. But I mean, Nawaz Sharif was sentenced to 10 years in his own government time when his party was in power for the corruption. And he found excuses, medical excuses, and he came to Britain for medical attention. And he never went to any hospital, never attended any doctor's surgery, and he's been here for the last 4 years approximately. And Imran Khan's government tried to extradite him, but as usual, British government is not interested. They like his lolly and they like his money. Anyway, going back to Imran Khan and his party in Pakistan, they depended on governing on their coalition partners, and there were 2 or 3 small parties that they depended on. Now, when America wanted to
Ajaz, we lost you there for a minute, Ajaz.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but
hello,
hello, Ajaz. Can you hear me?
And
yeah. I lost you when you said when America. After that, could you repeat from there, please?
Sorry, okay. America wanted air bases in Africa so they could keep an eye on Afghanistan after they pulled out. And Imran Khan completely flatly refused, says, we don't want to get involved in another war, whether it's for you or somebody else. Pakistan's going to pursue its own policy, and America didn't like it. Now, eventually, America did a regime change, successful regime change. And we all know how many times they've done it in the past. So the coalition partners of Imran Khan were enticed, bought off, with the help of Pakistani army, because that was involved as well. And the corrupt opposition politicians who were looking at sentences, they all made a combined opposition party, and with the help of American dollars, people were bought off in the parliament, and there was no confidence motion brought on. And so Imran Khan was out of government to America's liking and the opposition people's liking who were facing jail sentences. Imran Khan is a good leader. Before he came into politics, he actually collected money all over the world from mostly Pakistani people living abroad, and he created or built a cancer hospital. There wasn't any in Pakistan, a specialist hospital. right now, before coming to power, he managed to get 2 cancer hospitals built and a university. Okay. Now the next thing is he came in and at a very difficult economic time for Pakistan. He built it up, especially with COVID arriving at the same time. And he left when he was chucked out. His economic numbers were better than when he came in. I don't know how Mr. Asif has painted him as the worst person in the world. I agree with Ian, a lot of things he said. He's a decent guy. He was, Roger said, he was you know what he said? He said, I have got everything that I could wish for, and our God has given me everything. That's not the same as saying I'm super rich already and I don't need to be corrupt. He never said that, because I follow Pakistan politics. He never said that I'm super rich and I don't need to be corrupt. In any case, now you can actually, I'm going to show you something here. There is, I think you can probably see, he draws people. He's the biggest politician, biggest leader Pakistan has ever seen. And every other day, there's a big gathering in different cities, and people are following his lead, and there's going to be no other leader in Pakistan except for Imran Khan. Even the army will be swept away. He's calling all the people to converge in Islamabad, which is capital. Sometime he's going to call after the 20th of May, he's going to give them a call and they're going to all converge. And that's the revolution you should be looking for. Now, I still don't know how Mr. Asif went after him with both hands and what was the need for it. If you do research, for example, yourselves, if you do research, each person, I would suggest, you will find the facts about Mr. Imran Khan are completely diametrically opposed to what is being described today. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ajaz. This is really part of the tradition of when we welcome controversy, we welcome challenges to the ideas that have been put up by the platform. And, you know, thank you so much for no doubt stimulating some further discussion. Could I see which other comrades would like to come in for the further discussion? We'll give it a moment or two. Just let comrades collect their thoughts. Oh, hang on. Who's? Okay, Ian, you have your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, just briefly again, just to say,
Yeah.
as Sawel said in the chat, and as you did, it's good to hear an alternative point of view, and certainly that's the kind of point of view I've been hearing about Imran more from some of the folk I know in the Pakistani diaspora over here as well. Actually, irrespective of whether he's more good or more bad, I think getting back to why he went at this exact time, why the minor parties were, and some defectors, I think maybe from his own party, certainly the minor ones, were pressured by the generals and maybe induced by a bit of money to turn on him and to have this grand coalition of the two traditional parties now. Very suspicious timing with, as Matthew put in the chat, his links to China, but this particular pinch point of Ukraine, where he was taking an independent position. I saw a speech by him that was broadcast out to the world, where he was talking about Mossadegh and how the Americans have formed doing this all over the world for decades. So yeah, I think that's a key issue for us here in the imperialist countries. I think also when it comes to Pakistan, I think the tasks for the left would probably be to be part of a united front against this illegitimate government now. And then I think what, sorry, I can't remember for a second the main speaker's name. we're talking about the threat of it becoming like Sri Lanka at the end of your first speech. I suppose that was like when the Rajapaksas came back a couple of years ago, but now obviously they're gone again. And I don't think Imran's exactly like the Rajapaksas, but I think certainly if it's just him that's seen as opposing this carve up, then whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing or something in between, I could see him coming back with an absolute landslide the next time that there's a free and fair vote. I think it would be better if the left were in there fighting against this carve up too, independently, but maybe march together with separate banners, that kind of old idea of the United Front.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Anyone else want to come in on the discussion? There is still time for a bit more. Have we lost people?
Ed?
Yes.
If I could just ask another question. I mean, given our previous interest in, let's say, participating critically in the periphery of the PPP, what's happened to the PPP? Has it become just one of the other bourgeois parties? Where does it fit in the political landscape, right now?
I'm just looking at my. Oh yeah, Asif still is with us. Yeah. You've just moved on my screen, Asif. Okay, good. So you are here to answer some questions. Matthew, your hand is up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I just want to ask just a couple of questions, really. I'll put my camera on even. It's really to say, what's the nature of the deal with and the impact of the deal with China. I mean, obviously Pakistan's had an interest in having relations with China over many years. Principally, obviously, I think in an effort to counterbalance India, because obviously there's basically a sort of ongoing undeclared war between India and China has been for decades. Now resorting obviously to fighting each other on Himalayan glaciers with clubs. So it's what's the impact of that, and obviously as you say, I mean, Pakistan's really quite peculiar because you're saying, well, really, there's not really a development of the productive forces, in contrast to India, and essentially, a situation where you say, well, the capitalist class is merely this comprador class that operates, as parasitic without ever really developing anything, but at the same time obviously sits there in a very strategic position, has been, say, without including the deal with China, which is obviously critical to China, at the same time, he's seen as critical by the US, and was in fact, of course, the main route for support for the US intervention in Afghanistan, deeply critical for that. So it's how all those international factors, how does that actually go through into the political situation, and at the same time, given the fact that the point you make, and I think is clear that the actual ruling class is nakedly parasitic, and so I mean. You're facing. I mean, obviously, in Trotsky's words of decades ago, a system which is in decay, and which effectively almost is in. What you're saying is over decades they've left it in its existing state to rot. So I'm in a very difficult position. I think is what you're saying. So, I mean, you say a bit more about in terms of those sort of pressures on the regime. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Would any other comrade like to as Matthew's done, ask some questions, as Ajaz has done, to sort of challenge what's been said from the platform, or to add to what's been said. Any other comments? We're getting to the point where I will be asking, asking Asif to sum up. But I want to give people a chance. Yes, Ajaz, please come in again. Yeah.
Okay, it's just a small fact. I think most of you know that he was married to a billionaire's daughter, Jemima Goldsmith. And when they divorced, he's such an honorable man and very proud man. He refused to take a penny as of his right at divorce. Whatever Jemima was worth, he did not take a penny from her. He's a very proud man, and he's beyond corruption. And if you should actually, I'm going to put down some cities in the chat. You should look on the YouTube and mention those cities, like a meeting in Lahore, a meeting in Karachi, Imran Khan's meeting. And you see hundreds of thousands of people attending his meetings, public meetings. And that's the two things. Firstly, just make sure that you do know the fact that he refused to take a penny from her on his divorce. Secondly, please have a look at this meeting, how many people attend. And I'll tell you the very last fact. The night he was ousted, and he hadn't said anything on television or anything like that, there was hundreds of thousands of people came out, that's about 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, on the streets in his support and against his ouster. And that was people's own spontaneous feeling. And you could probably, if you people wanted to, trace it back to YouTube on the day he was thrown out. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajaz. Okay. Anyone else want to make a brief point, even if it's the second time you've spoken, a brief point? This is getting, like I say, getting to the point where I'm going to begin to get the meeting wound up, but it's a chance for anyone to add a little bit. Okay, well, in that case, oh, Roger, you just put your hand up. Please come in, Roger.
Just one point. Nobody is denying, Comrade Ajaz, nobody is denying that people have illusions in Imran Khan. The issue is whether those illusions are justified. And his record is that people have become desperately plunged further into poverty by the inflation under his rule. And as for that quote, he did say, I was just trying to try to find the quote on the internet, so I couldn't find it, but I've seen it. He said in so many words, I'm too rich to be corrupt. You can trust me not to be corrupt because I'm already a billionaire. So words to that effect. And well, okay. In any case, what we need to be discussing is not his personality, but his policies. And his policies have done nothing to achieve justice for the working class and the working population of Pakistan. You have constant repression, brutality, communal eruptions, the most horrific atrocities committed by the communalists, and Imran Khan plays absolutely to the tune of the communalists. He's whipped up communalism to an extent which even the previous regimes had never done. His support comes from elements within the sinister ISI intelligence community and within factions of the ruling class, the most corrupt factions of the ruling class. And I think I know that Comrade Ajaz plays a very positive role in helping to build socialist ideas among the population of Newham, where we both live. and where we fought quite an inspiring election campaign in the last few days. But if we're fighting for socialism in Newham, we have to be fighting for socialism also in Pakistan. And Imran Khan is definitely one of the main obstacles to the development of a genuinely democratic socialist movement in Pakistan. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, Ajaz, please come back. Please come back. Unmute yourself, yeah.
Sorry, I was just acknowledging what Roger said. Fine, we take it on board, look at it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right. Okay, well, any other comrade, maybe someone who hasn't said anything so far this meeting, would you want to make a short point? Okay, in that case, I'm going to ask Asif, please, to come back in, and this is the conclusion of the political part of the meeting, Asif, so please, feel free to sum up and deal with the points that have been made fully.
Thank you, comrade. I have some issues with my English, so apologies from my side.
No, you're doing very well, Asif. You're doing very well. We're understanding what you're saying.
I will respond the contribution.
Excuse me,
comrade.
hang on. Excuse me, Asif. There is some electrical interference on the line. Can I first of all ask everyone who's not speaking to mute? I've still got a lot of electrical interference. I'm going to try muting myself as well and just leave it to Asif for a minute. Are other comrades finding there's interference, electrical interference? Yeah. Okay.
It was when Asif unmuted it started, I think.
Sorry?
I think it started when Asif unmuted, yeah.
Oh, it's gone now. Okay.
Yeah, it's because he's muted himself. That's why it's his connection.
Oh, Asif, it's your connection. I don't know what we're going to do about this. I'm no expert on how you deal with that. Asif, do you want to try? Have you got another device you could come into the meeting on, maybe, that wouldn't be so susceptible to feedback? Oh, try again. Try again, anyone. I think Asif's gone and he's going to come back by the looks of it. And just give him a minute. Oh, here we go. I'm trying to admit him. Oh, there we are. Asif, are you there?
He's there. He's coming. He's connecting again now.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Comrade Asif.
Thank you, comrade.
Thank you. Please come in, Asif. Yeah.
It is true, comrades, that all the sections of bourgeoisie in any country, as in Pakistan, belong to ruling classes and are enemies of working class. However, we must differentiate between decode roving gangs of robbers who only loots and other one who not only snatches money but also kills while living. it doesn't mean that we should start supporting the farmer or prefer the farmer over the latter. We must fight to see free the working class from all the factions of the ruling class. However, we must also consider these questions for each of the above two cases. What are the ramifications of coming to the power of one or the other factions of ruling classes on the social consciousness of working class? What political and cultural tendencies would dominate the society in general? And above all would be conditions for revolutionary work improve or deteriorate. Furthermore, we must keep this in mind that if a certain section of the ruling class seems less harmful, it is not out of the benevolence. It is basically certain political and economic interests which determine their behavior. In certain circumstances, if such interests create a harmful environment for our revolutionary work, we must avail this to the full. However, there is another dialectical conundrum. The historical condition which promoted the rise of the PTI was actually created by all the traditional parties of this country. As some comrade asked question about PPP, initially PPP was the product or the party which emerged from the movement of 1968-69, and initially his role was a revolutionary in some sense, but Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and his successor made compromises, and now the PPP is completely a bourgeois political party which has the agenda of neoliberalism and the agenda to sabotage the cause of working classes. The rise of Imran Khan was the key reason that the failure of PPP to solve the issues in Pakistan and also the PMLN. And we cannot, we must discuss the issues as Comrade Ijaz mentioned, as I quote some figures, that the overall debt of Pakistan was 27,000 trillion rupees when Imran Khan into power. Now the debt and liabilities of the Pakistani state is 50,000 trillion rupees, and trade deficit is going to increase day by day. Or devaluation of money created a inflation which has never witnessed in Pakistan. Almost 60% devaluation in the currency, and foreign debt rises from $95 billion to $125 billion. That was the policies of the Imran Khan, which created a situation that the establishment was compelled to take him down. All things that establishment considered to make the government of Imran Khan would have more pressure on establishment, and rift between the establishment to run the country and policies, economic policies, and failure of governance of Imran Khan was so important issues. He failed completely, as in his regime almost 33 million people unemployed in industry, and huge crisis in power sector, as our circular debt is on 24 2,000 Pakistani rupees, and petrol prices are rising day by day, which created a situation that is creating a situation where the social explosion can happen. So the establishment and other um, uh, rulers of serious rulers of Pakistan decided to take down Imran Khan. American intervention was a part, not the basic reason, but the situation in Afghanistan and also in the Imran Khan visit to Russia and China was the reason for America, for US to go against Imran Khan. But these are not the reasons, basic reasons for the Imran Khan government collapse. These are the secondary reasons. The main reasons was the internal contradiction in the state establishment and elite. So they have to control these. As we saw that in Washrif position on establishment and on army in recent years, there was a serious conflict on the policies of Nawaz Sharif and establishment. That is why they take down the government of Nawaz Sharif in 2018 and established a government that establishment can control, completely control over it. But the project has failed completely and created a situation in which there was no way to going forward. And if Imran Khan was in power for few months, it will be disastrous for society and for the ruling classes. The whole system can be toppled through his policies. That was the main reasons why Imran Khan was taken down by the establishment. The key role in Imran Khan's poster was the establishment of Pakistan on serious policies and the economic crisis, which is going to be severe in coming days. The newly formed government has very limited options to stabilize the situation. There is a possibility that if they completely fail to address the issues of working masses, then there is a situation if Pakistan couldn't get an installment from debt installment, loan installment from IMF, it could be disastrous for Pakistan. We have $10 billion reserves remaining, and we have huge imports bills, and front account deficits is increasing day by day. These are the main issues and challenges for the new government, and there is no stability. The Noon League, newly elected government has no other plan, no other economic plan than Imran Khan. They will have to go to IMF for new loans, and if IMF did not give loan to Pakistan, then no other country, no other financial institutions will give them the money. So the crisis is there, which created the present situation in Pakistan. That is the inherent and organic crisis of Pakistani state and capitalism, which cannot be solved in the bounds of capitalism in Pakistan. And there is a reason that this fragile and weak setup is going on. The working class is not in move. The working class is not in the movement. The protest of Imran Khan, Pakistan has 220 million population, and there is a very little people in Imran Khan's protests and in his sittings. whole population, 90% of Pakistani population do not believe on the system, on the parties, on PTI, on Noon League or PPP. There is no other radical alternative on the political horizon which can attract people. But in the process, that capitalist crisis will create the situation where the working masses must have to intervene in grassroots politics. And if the working class enter in the scenario in the history of Pakistan, then the situation will change, and that will create the opportunity for the radical left. In normal times, the people doesn't go to the radicalization. They have their issues, they have their problems, they have unemployment, they have poverty, they have many other problems. They have to face their problems. But in difficult times, when the system exposes and when the system is not going to fulfill their living conditions, then people will decide to take down that system, and that will definitely happen in Pakistan in near future, because there is no other way. No stability can be achieved in this capitalist situation in Pakistan. So the crisis is there. We, the working class and working masses, must have to bear the price hike, must have to bear the unemployment, must have to bear the repression, must have to bear the worse conditions. And there is no other options for the working people and the masses of Pakistan. And it will give them a way towards the coming class struggle in Pakistan, as we witnessed in 1968-69. That is the only way that the Pakistani working class and poor masses can change their life, and that will definitely come. It is our Marxist and socialist belief that the working class must have to act in the political situation, and the time is coming for revolutionaries, and we have a ground preparation, we have a very sound organizational basis in Pakistan, and we have a united front policy to take action against IMF policies and against the economic issues in Pakistan. And we will prepare, we will organize, we will fight for the socialism in Pakistan, as we have done it before in difficult times. Now the time is coming for youth struggles, not only for Pakistan, but overall all over in the world. We have witnessed in Sri Lanka, we have witnessed in many other countries. Iran is going through a new movement against price hikes, and that will definitely come to Pakistan, this situation. And working class will act in this situation definitely. And we have the courage, we have the strength, and we have the Marxist basis in Pakistani society, and we will definitely build a revolutionary alternative and overthrow this brutal capitalist system. Long live socialist revolution, long live comrades.
Well, thank you very much, Asif, for your contribution to this meeting. I apologize to the comrades for the technicalities that which made the sound quality of Asif's last contribution quite difficult to follow, but I've got to say I was able to hear the words that Asif was saying, and the clarity and the inspiration that Asif talked with is something really to carry away from this meeting. The comrades in Pakistan has the courage, the strength, the Marxist ideas for revolutionary transformation. So thank you again, Asif, for that, and for a really thank you for all the comrades who contributed, for pooling ideas and creating important questions that need to be thought through and discussed again and again to help clarify these ideas for the revolutionary movement. So I'm going to go back to Roger now, who will say a few words about next week's meeting of WIN, and then we will close the meeting.
Well, I'm sorry, comrades, but we are not quite sure. We have different options for the meeting next week. We do have, I think most of the comrades here are on our mailing list. We have a mailing list of about 350 to 400 comrades around the world in 25 or 30 countries. If anybody here is not on the mailing list, could you send me your email address? Maybe you could put it in the chat. If you like, you can make it privately to me on the chat. But you will get a notice. We will have a meeting. We have meetings every week. We've had the most inspiring reports from comrades in every continent, like the one today from Comrade Asif. So please make sure that we can notify you by making sure that we have your contact details. I don't know if there's any other comrades who have any announcements to make.
Roger, if I could, in your invitation for this discussion, there's mention of the imprisoned Belarusian trade unionists. Now, I want to thank the comrades that have taken action, and we have seen action, which I'll, get up on Facebook. But really, a lot more is required. And the latest news is that Gennadi's been put in almost indefinite detention in the KGB cells in Belarus, and we do need to step up the solidarity action. We've sent emails out to probably 60 or 70 trade union leaders and trade unions, but we're hoping to get more action by British MPs and elsewhere in the British Labour movement in direct solidarity with our comrades who are in the cells right now. Mm.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Okay, all right. Well, comrades, that's the end of the meeting. Look forward to seeing you next Sunday at the usual time. And thanks very much for your participation. Bye.
Bye, comrades.